Today's discussion will be presented in 3 sections since we are recording it for a radio broadcast on Federal News Radio 1500 AM. You're welcome to post questions and comments during the session, and we'll try to answer them online. I'd like to introduce our moderator, Jason Miller, Executive Editor at Federal News Radio 1500 AM and federalnewsradio.com.
Welcome to the discussion. My guests today are Dr. Carl Mathias, the Chief Information Officer for the Justice Department's U.S. Marshal Service, John Moses, the Director of the Governance and Enterprise Management Services Division at the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, Mitchell Thurmbrew, the Acting Chief Information Officer at the Indian Health Service in the Department of Health and Human Services, and David Young, the Senior Vice President for Strategic Government for CenturyLink. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. Before we get started, let me set some context for our discussion. This December will be 1 year since the White House released its final IT modernization strategy. Federal Chief Information Officer Suzette Kent mentioned in August that OMB and the agency lead teams have accomplished 42 of 52 tasks outlined in that plan. She expects the final 12 to be done before the end of the year. The Enterprise Infrastructure Solutions, or EIS contract, which is run by GSA, includes 9 vendors, including CenturyLink, is mentioned 19 times throughout that strategy. There are 3 discrete tasks that focus on the impact OMB expects EIS to have on agencies. EIS provides the next generation voice, video, and data services on an enterprise level for all agencies. In fact, GSA and OMB have been very clear about telling agencies that EIS should underpin nearly all IT modernization efforts. In that IT modernization strategy, OMB says EIS provides access to managed service security tools and services, helps small and micro agencies access new capabilities, and consolidates acquisition of the telecommunications and security services. But so far in the early stages of EIS, agencies haven't necessarily jumped on the IT modernization train. But at the same time, that doesn't mean IT modernization isn't happening across the government. For example, OMB says in the second quarter of the President's Management Agenda report that approximately 45% of all civilian CFO Act agencies have put their email in the cloud. About 60% of all agencies have implemented Phase 1 tools under the CDM program, and 30% of all agencies have implemented Phase 2 tools, again, under CDM cybersecurity program. So how can agencies continue to make progress, take advantage of the next generation services offered by EIS, and continue to improve how they serve their citizens? Well, once again, that's where our panel comes in. Let me start at the far end of the table with John Moses. Let's just start with IT modernization. Nuclear Regulatory Commission is doing a lot of work. What is your IT modernization strategy?
So we have a 2-part strategy at the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. The first part is over the next 3 years, we're enhancing the availability, reliability, and security of our ITM services. First off, we're replacing the agency's fleet of workstations and laptops, and we're building out the campus secured wireless network. For the second component, we're modernizing legacy IT and adopting cost-neutral or cost-minimal shared cloud and third-party shared services to facilitate long-term cost savings. Some of the examples of that include shifting from a multiplicity of PBX and a VoIP system to a centralized unified VoIP platform for our campus and our regional offices, upgrading video teleconferencing capabilities to support Skype for Business. 3, shifting from on-premise email, calendar, contacts to Microsoft's Office 365 cloud services, so we're one of those 45%. And last, migrating mission systems such as the Nuclear Regulatory Commission's high-performance computing from on-premise hosting to cloud hosting. We're going to AWS for that service.
So there's a lot there to unpack, and the one quick follow-up question is, it seems like there's a lot going on at once, so how the prioritization of that, how are you guys kind of laying that out? Are you trying to get to cloud and then adding those apps, or are you looking at your app saying, okay, which goes to cloud? Give me a sense of kind of the order. I know there's no 1, 2, 3 order.
So we've staggered some of the implementation of our modernizations. So we deployed Office 365, but not the full stack. We deployed the email, calendars, contacts initially. Later on, we'll deploy the OneDrive capabilities, and then we've also, actually prior to cloud, we even deployed Skype for Business. So we're taking each one at a kind of a careful, thoughtful pace to allow the organization to adjust to the new changes. In addition, because at the same time, what I didn't include, earlier in the year, we modernized our fleet of printers or multifunction devices. So we did that at one point. Then we did 365. Then we're doing unified communication through VoIP. Then we're going to lay out laptops. So that's why we're kind of alternating hardware, software, hardware, software.
Excellent. Now, Carl, at the U.S. Marshal Service, I know I heard Joe Klimovich, the CIO at Justice, speak just recently, and he talked about consolidating data centers, moving to the cloud. There's a ton going on. So maybe we'll talk about the Marshal Service's viewpoint of IT modernization.
So, and we share a lot with NRC in our strategy here. DOJ has led the way in terms of how they handle their components with movement to Office 365. So we are now in Office 365. At the end of this month, I'm going to decommission my Exchange servers. I will tell you.
Is there a party?
Yes, that's what I was just heading to, Jason, was when I did this for the Headquarters Air Force at the Pentagon, it was the happiest day of my life. This will be the new happiest day of my life. It's just a burden I don't need, and it's better managed through a central shared instance to Joe, like you indicated, Joe has set up and led the effort to go to. But as far as data centers, I'm happy to report I don't have any. We have moved into 3 of the DOJ's data centers, 2 of which are operated by the FBI. By the end of this month, actually, I will be in only 2 of those data centers. Our long-term goal, though, at the Marshals is to go ahead and get into the cloud. And so right now I'm looking at GovCloud solutions, but we aren't ruling out that there might not be a hybrid approach with a government-run cloud combined with a commercial cloud capability. We're going to do what's optimal for delivery of services and what's optimal for the taxpayer in terms of cost. So in terms of IT modernization and that aspect, we're doing those things. But we're also, if you look into the agency strategic plan, and I always say my IT strategic plan is the agency strategic plan, you'll find in the agency strategic plan that we need to modernize our warrant systems, our prisoner management systems, things like that. We are actually on board and on track to deliver a modernization system of that warrant system, and that is going to happen first part at the end of this month, and then another delivery in the January-February timeframe, and then continuing deliveries. That's through the agile development process as that goes out, and we'll eventually replace our old legacy warrant and prisoner management system. And then, and also adding to that, when we look at modernization, part of, I do actually have IT strategic goals, and one of those beyond the modernization of the legacy warrant system is delivery of mobile capabilities, because our deputies are out in the field. This is where we want them operating. So we're doing the best we can to put systems in their hands and make them mobile. So we have simultaneously been putting out apps on the iPhones that allow them to, for example, do identification, biometric identification of people. Say we're pursuing a fugitive, reading license plates, being able to read a driver's license, those kinds of things. So we're pursuing a lot of fronts, and I won't go into them all, give other people a chance to talk here.
Carl, ton going on. Let me pick up on one thing. You seem to be doing 2-front assault, if you will. You have the mission side when you talk about the warrant systems and some of the others. Then you also have the back end. Are you finding that you're slowly getting out of that back end piece and really just putting your focus when it comes to IT modernization on the mission side?
That's my goal. You know, what I tell my staff is that if you read all the missions that the Marshals have to accomplish, nowhere in there does it say host large data sets or have hardware servers or take care of circuits. And I'm looking here at David Young next to me on CenturyLink. We'd rather let others do that, whether it's a commercial company or another agency within the Department of Justice. For example, our VoIP system is the U.S. Attorney's VoIP system. We share with them. Our help desk we share with the ATF, alcohol, tobacco, firearms, and explosives. So wherever I can, I share a service rather than do my own, and my goal is to not actually own hardware at some point.
That's excellent. Now, David from CenturyLink, let's turn to you and just kind of react initially to what Carl and John are saying. Is this a trend you're starting to see among your clients and when it comes to IT modernization?
It sure is. I think the uniqueness is to listen to both John and Carl talk, and they've attacked different parts of their IT systems. And I think that's one of the messages is very clear, is each agency has a different set of priorities and how they categorize them and what's important, whether it's the mission side or taking care of the administration side, whether they're going to share services with another agency or look for an outsource model. Those are all very unique to each agency that we're interacting with. I like to also talk about IT modernization. It's different today than the way we would have talked about it probably for the last 30 years. And that's what I call, it's a lifestyle now. If we would go back in time, we saw technology change with the length of contracts. We're very fortunate to have lived in that cycle. If we look at the network, as an example, EIS is the 4th version of GSA's contract. It also coincides with frame relay, ATM, MPLS, and what we're seeing now is the technology change quicker than the contract evolution. In fact, EIS is a 15-year contract. I guarantee you technology will change multiple times throughout the course of this 15 years, where we were very fortunate in the past to be able to build a very static network to handle all of these changes that we're seeing. In today's world, the network is elastic, and it continues to move and morph. And all the things we heard the guys talking about were applications. And an application flow, when it changes, when you take something from a dedicated server and you put it up in the cloud, it has a repercussion onto the network. And so our ability to understand what's happening through the whole stack of technology becomes really critical for the foundation being that network. The other thing that I think we need to consider through this modernization effort is really to look at applications, look at hosting, look at cloud. How does that wrap with security? So at the foundational layer, the network, at the overarching layer, how do we protect what it is that we're doing to our enterprise? Are the two critical things I see in this lifestyle.
Right, there's so much to unpack from what you said. We're going to get through it all, I promise, during this. But I want to go back to one of the early comments you made during your discussion is IT modernization is different today. It's a lifestyle approach. Mm-hmm. And I think when Carl mentioned the use of iterative development, agile, DevOps, whatever we're calling it, DevSecOps, I saw you kind of like, you took note of that. And that's why we're different now. That's why IT modernization is not,
sure is.
Hey, Carl, here's a new, or hey, John, here's a new system, now you're done with it. It's the continuous. Mm-hmm. Talk maybe a little bit about that piece of IT.
Sure is. I think if we would again go back in time, we built purpose-built things, and they were custom. In today's DevOps, it's how do you take something that's already 89% developed, modify it ever so slightly for the uniqueness of an enterprise, and the process you do that in becomes very critical. And if you can get into a good rhythm where you can replicate how you think, how you approach a problem, how you define the problem, how it affects your customers, how you think through it, how you pilot it, how you trial it, and then how do you roll it out to the organization becomes very critical. And if we can learn that muscle memory, then we're going to be very adept at being able to handle the challenges that we face every month. Something new shows up in our life, and so if we can develop that methodology and the organization, the enterprise understands it, we'll be able to adapt very quickly.
Let me turn to Mitchell from Indian Health Service. You got a chance to listen and hear. I'm sure you guys are going down a very similar path. Maybe talk a little bit about Indian Health Service and IT modernization.
Sure, and I wanted to start out just talk about our mission and as our guest mentioned previously before, our mission is to raise the physical, mental, social, and spiritual health of American Indians and Alaska Natives to the highest level possible. And so we want to think about our technology modernization in terms of, what is it doing to support that mission? And so we're jumping on board with, looking at hyperconverged infrastructure, with cloud integration, looking at centralized cloud brokering, looking forward to getting on board with the new EIS contract. The network upgrades from TDM to Ethernet are critical for us. But I want to also focus a little bit on expanding broadband in our rural communities, because as we deliver these services out, it's really nationwide. We really feel the lack of infrastructure in the rural areas, and so we're looking to these contracts to help create those secure connections out across the country in a way that we can move from trusted internet connections to more managed trusted internet protocol or MTIPS connections, get away from old T1 circuits. We still have 58% of our circuits across the country are still T1 circuits back to the network, and 200 of those sites only have a single T1 connection to connect back to that infrastructure, and that infrastructure includes our electronic health record, and it's really sensitive to things like latency. Latency back to our data centers. We're still operating a data center in Albuquerque, and so we have lots of data needs that still require that, but we're definitely looking at how health information technology modernization will impact that in the future, and we're starting to explore those options now, and through the next couple of years we'll really be developing that strategy.
The 58% number kind of stands out to me as still on T1s, and mainly that's because of the communities you serve is out in the rural areas. Do you see a solution is in the IT modernization under that umbrella? Is that the first piece you got to look at, is how do we kind of move off that older technology? Or it's very similar to what I was asking John, how are you prioritizing what comes first, if you will, since like John said, there's a lot of needs at once?
Yeah, so the needs of our clinicians out in the field, and as they run into barriers with those network technologies, they become a priority as we have expanded services. The need for improved radiology reads is a tremendous burden on our networks, for example. Those things come up as a priority, but the strategy will be to leverage that EIS contract to create new and more trust MTIPS connections, so that we have better secured network speed out into those areas, and a lot more options into those areas, because right now some of those areas are just very limited with the options that you have, and the new contract will help us with that.
You brought up the electronic health record, and I know of covering Indian Health Service in the past, talking to some of your predecessors in the CIO role, that's always been a huge focus. How do we get the telehealth and stuff, and you've got to have the technology behind it. So let's take a quick break. When we come back, we can jump into so many things that David laid out there. You're listening to the panel discussion, A Roadmap for Enabling IT Modernization, sponsored by CenturyLink on federalnewsradio.com and 1500 AM.